Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is David Brooks, the Cadillac Counselor, coming at you to tell you a little bit what's going on in my mind. Today, I'm just feeling under the weather, but you know what? I said I'm coming on here and I'm gonna talk anyway. And what I'm gonna talk about today is this is not uncut news. I'm not gonna talk about any news today, but I'm gonna talk about privilege. You know, so many people got these issues when it comes to talking about privilege, whether it's societal privilege, racial privilege, economic privilege. We have to admit that there is some form of privilege that is going on in America, regardless of where it's at or where you find it. And I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm going to be very transparent, is that we as parents, we try to give our best to our children. Really what we're trying to do is we're trying to give them privileges that they most likely would not be able to do. Like, for instance, if you take your kids skiing, that's privilege. Because what you're doing is you're giving them the privilege of understanding something that's different than what they normally would get at their particular level. When you look at kids that grow up in poverty, a lot of times they don't have the same privileges as other people. But we need to really break down what privilege is. Privileges is whenever we give something to somebody and tell them kind of how they are going to live their life or how they're going to see the world, and we put them in these categories. So let's break this down into American population and just to American history in general. Let's go all the way back. So whenever we go all the way back, who was here first? The Indians, okay? And the Indians, they might have had their own privileges of some sort, whatever it was. I don't know the Indian culture that well, but I do know one thing is that they had their own system going. Well, all of a sudden, these people just decide to come into America and call it their own. So what happened? Well, they started off trading with them, trading information, trading supplies, and then what happened? Well, we got to understand that most of these Europeans that came over were definitely not of Christian beliefs. They came across as somewhat understanding Christianity, but they were leaving from this form of Christianity. So we got to look at most of the people that came over were ex-convicts and were really not really liking society for what it was there. So what they did, they come over here, and what they do is they hijack the Indians. Well, then they hijack the Indians. They figure out how to grow crops on this American soil. It started to be a trade. What happened? So let's go a little further. So then Black America came in, started bringing Africans over to America. Well, right here, they might have had privileges at some sort in their life in Africa. But let's talk about it. So when they came over to America, they came over first just to be workers. Then all of a sudden, the Americans decided, well, we'll just take them and don't pay for anything, and we'll just make them work. So right then, they took all of the privileges away from whoever, these Africans that came over to America. This is where it really gets good. Because now they had to give them some type of privileges. Okay, they had no privileges because they were slaves. So then the owners of the slaves gave them privileges. How did they give them privileges? This is how. So when an African would come onto the stage, a picnic, if you want to go even deeper, look up the word picnic for what it was really worth, because it was started in pick-a-nigger, but we're not even going to go there. But the form of picnics used to be done on Sundays. It was a evening of picking a slave it was dinner time. This was a big old dinner, a big old buffet, what they call it. And then they would come in and they would pick these black people. Well, the black people who were lighter skinned would go for more value. The dark-skinned that was really strong and showed that they could work the field, they were more expensive. So what ended up happening was the black people, the Africans that were coming over to be African Americans, they were then giving privileges to how they were going to respond to the rest of the world around them. So once they understood that being light-skinned would be better for them because they would end up being put in the house to work, or they would give privileges of not being able to have to work outside. So what happened? This became a clash between the African American. This clash has been embedded in our culture ever since. So now let's talk about privilege. The only people who can give away privileges are the people who hold all the privilege. Take a king, for instance. A king rules over the whole land. When he gives privileges to people, then they have the opportunity that most time they would not have gotten beforehand. And this can only be given by the keeper of privilege. So this is what I'm saying. All in all, for some reason, people have an issue with privilege. Giving over authority is literally giving away privileges. I don't understand why people get so upset about knowing that they have privileges. Just like the other day when I talked about the young lady thought she had privilege, societal privilege, to go and ask for a vacation after running into the Capitol. People, we need to be honest with ourselves. The reason why people don't want to admit that there are privileges in the world is because they want to believe that they did everything on their own. Just like my children, I'm paving the pathway for them to have privileges. I hope that they use those privileges to the best of their ability. I put them in private school, put them in different situations, put them in sports so that they could understand and be more well-rounded. I want them to use those privileges to be able to be a better person. But what we have noticed in our society is that people use those privileges against other people. And what they've done is they create the atmosphere that they see privilege, but they don't want to admit that they have privilege. I can admit I have privilege. My father worked at Dow Chemical. My mother owned a daycare. I had privileges that other people didn't have. But I'm going to tell you this. There are some people in this world that hold all the privilege, and they are not relinquishing what they have. Privilege means power. Power means privilege, point blank. And if you don't believe it, there's a reason why. And probably the reason why you don't believe in privilege is because you don't want to admit that privilege helped you get to where you're at. Some people, they don't use their privilege. I've seen people not use their privilege. Doesn't mean they don't have it. It's just they're not using it. I see people who grow up in really good homes, really good neighborhoods, and they choose not to use their privilege. I've seen people have counseled people who had privilege, who didn't use their privilege. But as soon as they understand their privilege of what they've created or what their parents have created, a lot of times their life comes out a whole lot better than what it was before. Just a small explanation of privilege, but we gotta admit, there are privileges in America. Started way back when the Europeans came over to America. This is what we've been dealing with, is everyone trying to pretty much just pump people. Take it easy. David Brooks, the Cadillac Counselor.